Hi everyone, welcome to the next episode of the Massive Fan podcast. In order to learn a little bit more about what I do with this channel, you can go back and watch my first video. In this particular video, I'm going to be going into my thoughts on Uncle Jim and Li Ming's relationship in the Thai BL drama Moonlight Chicken. If you have watched my previous video on the review for Moonlight Chicken, where I kind of talk about why you need to be watching that show, I explore it from a lot of different aspects like the story, the themes, the acting, the cinematography. If you're here after watching that video, then welcome back. That being said, there will be spoilers in this video. I'm going to be going into a lot of different plot points, a lot of aspects of both of these characters, which will draw on the storyline, which will reveal things about the story itself. For those of you who are here for the discourse, welcome. I can't wait to hear from you guys. I'm going to be sharing my thoughts on what is one of my favorite relationships from Moonlight Chicken, which is the relationship between Uncle Jim and Li Ming. Without further ado, let's get started. So to kick things off, I think it's important to start with when exactly did Li Ming come to live with Uncle Jim? Now, this is something the show never really explicitly states. I think it's around episode 7 that we kind of hear Li Ming say that it's been 5-6 years since he's seen his mom. So that must be around the time frame with which he's been living with Uncle Jim. Now, if we take Li Ming's age to be around 18 in the show, given that he's finishing school and trying to figure out what to do next, I think we can safely say that Li Ming probably moved in with Uncle Jim when he was around 11 or 12. That's an interesting age for such a big change for a child, because it's an age in which you're already aware of what's going on around you. You kind of understand relationships a little better. You've grown up with your mother for 10 plus years of your life, and there is trust there, there is a bond there, and to kind of be left behind or be left with someone else without any indication of when you would be going back to your original guardian, I can see something like that being very hard to deal with for a child that age, and also very confusing, because why is this happening? Is it my fault? Why isn't my mother coming back? I think Li Ming must have wondered all of these things, and it really kind of makes you feel for him as a character. It also explains why he's a little guarded, I would say, especially with the adults in his life, like principally that being Uncle Jim, right? Because Uncle Jim straddles this role of not quite a parent, but also being the authority figure in Li Ming's life. You can tell from day one that he loves this kid. From episode 1 rather, not day 1, that he really loves this kid, that he would do anything for Li Ming, that he is trying to give Li Ming a better life, trying to ensure that he's setting Li Ming up for success, his version of success, but you know, he wants to see Li Ming have a different life than him. And I think all of that comes across very clearly within the first 2-3 episodes. But at the same time, I think Uncle Jim is always aware of the fact that Li Ming is not his own child, right? And so there is a line that he feels like he can't cross in even getting closer to Li Ming. Maybe it comes from Uncle Jim's own hang-ups on, love and being hurt by the people he loves, that he is also trying to keep Li Ming at a little bit of a distance, because he knows that while I love this kid to pieces, he isn't mine. His mother could show up at any point of time and take him back, and I wouldn't be able to stop it, right? So I think their dynamic is so interesting right off the bat because of these reasons. I do, like, if you do look at the timeline of when Li Ming came and when Beam, who is Uncle Jim's ex, left the picture, let's say left the picture. So when you look at when Li Ming probably came into Uncle Jim's life and when Beam left Uncle Jim's life, there is probably a little bit of an overlap, because Li Ming says 5 to 6 years that he's not seen his mother, so he's been living with Uncle Jim. Whereas Beam is shown to have left Uncle Jim's life 5 years before. So there is definitely some kind of overlap, but it's not something that's ever addressed. Like, did Li Ming ever know Beam? Did they ever interact? Did he kind of see the aftermath of how Jim was after Beam left, and how did that kind of impact his whole opinion of Uncle Jim and his life and what he's going through? I think it's all really interesting to consider. It's not something the show explores. It's not something very many people I've seen talking about the show explores as well. But I feel like it's always something that's been in my head that, did Li Ming know Beam? And if he did, then what did he make of that entire situation? Right? Because I think he's aware of the fact that his uncle is closed off, that his uncle is very wary of letting other people in. And this is kind of seen in that sequence where he's trying to hard sell one to Uncle Jim while they're shopping in the market, where he says, did you guys fight? I think one is a great guy. He's so good at so many things, and it's heartwarming to watch, because there's this boy has seen that his uncle is a little happier around this new person, and he likes one as well, and he's like, I want to see my uncle happier, and so I don't want him to lose this person. And so it's a very sweet scene altogether. But I think it's also a telling scene, because I feel like maybe he's seen that Jim has been so unhappy over the last few years, and he knows why that is, and that's also why he's kind of trying to push Jim towards opening up to one and letting one into his life. Now, getting to a couple of scenes that really stand out for me between Uncle Jim and Li Ming in the show. It was hard to pick just a few, honestly, but I've picked 3 that I think are very critical to exploring both their characters as well as their relationships. And as I kind of go into each scene, I'll also share my theories on how Li Ming and Uncle Jim feel about each other in those situations, and why I think certain dialogues were said, the way they were said, why the scenes were put together in the way that they are. So let's dive into this. It's really interesting from a point of view of learning more about Li Ming itself, because at this point in episode 1, we know a lot about Jim, or I won't say a lot. We know a lot of the episode focused on Jim and focused on one and how that kind of dynamic was playing out. But this scene is where you really get insight into Li Ming's character, and I think it tells you a lot about him. I think one, obviously there is that tension of, okay, so let's go into that actually. So the scene starts off with Li Ming kind of getting irritated that Uncle Jim isn't believing him, and he says something along the lines of, I made one mistake and now you don't trust me. Now, I have a theory about this. I think that given the fact that Li Ming and Jim have lived together for 5-6 years, it is, I won't say impossible, but it's highly unlikely that all of those 5-6 years were filled with tension and arguments and general pissed offness on Li Ming's part with his uncle. I actually think what happened was very, very close to when we are dropped into the show. I feel like that incident where Uncle Jim walks in on Li Ming trying to smoke in his room, Li Ming being embarrassed and angry at being caught, and them fighting about it. I feel like that happened just before we are dropped right into the story of Moonlight Chicken. And that is kind of the source of all of that tension that exists between Li Ming and Jim throughout the series. And I have evidence to back this up, or what I see as evidence. I actually think there are so many instances in the show where that smoking a cigarette scene gets called back to, right, as a turning point in their relationship, in showing why they are having the current dynamic. And the first time it happens is during this argument at the inspector's house, where Li Ming says, I made one mistake and you don't trust me at all. He's very defensive. He knows that maybe he didn't do the right thing by trying to smoke inside the house when he knew his uncle might not be okay with it. But at the same time, he's a teenager, he's self-righteous, he's angry that, that one mistake is costing him whatever trust his uncle had in him. Also, another thing that kind of comes out in this scene is his belief in this is wrong, this is right, and if you are right, you shouldn't be punished for it. I think that's something very clear that comes out about his personality, and it also gives away his naivete a little bit. And here I'll talk from my experience of having grown up in an Asian country where corruption is a fairly normal thing to see, and the fact that people with connections and influence are rarely punished for wrongdoing. It is the folks with less that suffer. And I think obviously Uncle Jim is very aware of that reality, but Li Ming, the way he says, what are you afraid of? Because they have more power than us, because they have more money. Why should that stop us? Why does that mean that we need to give in to something? I think that gives away that he's not experienced that reality yet, and it also tells me that maybe Uncle Jim has been sheltering him a little bit in this, because even in this scene when they're arguing about it, Uncle Jim never outright says that yes, you're not going to win this argument. He just says, I don't want this to go to the police station. And when Li Ming brings up, why not, he doesn't really respond to that. So I think it's very telling in a lot of aspects of Li Ming's character, but also it's telling that Uncle Jim is quite protective over Li Ming and quite protective of this naivete in Li Ming. He doesn't want to disillusion the boy, not right now. He wants him to have a better view of the world than Uncle Jim himself has. And I think that's actually a really sweet kind of takeaway from that whole argument. Now, going into the second scene, I'll let it play and then we can discuss it afterwards. Actually, this scene is the second callback to that smoking incident, and it's also the first time we see what Li Ming was talking about when he said, I made one mistake and you don't trust me. This is the first time we see why that is, right? Because you see Jim's kind of flashback to Li Ming standing at his cupboard and taking the cigarette and him walking in, which is what incites him to want to check that drawer to see, is there any sign in there of Li Ming getting into the wrong kind of crowd, any sign in there that would tell him why Li Ming didn't come back that night, where he is. And then obviously Li Ming walks in on him as he's snooping for, and what follows is this very explosive argument, of which I just showed you a very, very small part. I think that part is really important actually, so I'll go into that part in specific now and then also expand on what happens after. Now, in the section that we saw, we kind of see Li Ming lash out, for lack of a better word. We see him say, that he was never asked if he wanted to be born, and he hates the fact that he was born into poverty. He hates the fact that they're poor and that he has to work so hard. And you see Jim's heart break a little bit in this, because this is exactly what he's trying to get Li Ming out of. He wants Li Ming to have a better life, and that's what he says. He says, I want you to live a better life. I want you to be better. I want you to have, everything I do it for you, right? And Li Ming's response to that is, I don't want you to do it anymore, right? I don't want to owe you anything. I will live my life on my terms. Now, I think this says a lot about how Li Ming feels towards Uncle Jim. I actually think it says a lot more than most people pick up, and maybe that's because they haven't obsessively watched the show 10 times like me, almost back to back at this point in the span of 4-5 months. But I think Li Ming feels both grateful to Uncle Jim, but also resentful, because I think he's obviously aware of the fact that hey, my mom up and ditched. She's not come back, but this man he's opened his home to me, he's opened his life to me. He's not had the easiest time, but he's always made sure that I am taken care of. And so there is a lot of gratefulness in Li Ming for Uncle Jim, and we actually see that more towards the end. Once their whole conflict gets resolved, then Li Ming expresses it a lot more. He keeps saying, thank you so much for everything. And but I think at the same time, why I'm saying he's resentful of it is, in his head, he's racked up some kind of debt. Right? And I'm not saying that Jim thinks about it that way. I don't think Jim thinks about it that way. I think Jim thinks about taking care of Li Ming as his duty, right? As his uncle, as his guardian. But Li Ming obviously is aware of what the situation being what it is, and he feels like he owes Uncle Jim for this massive task of having provided for him, of having taken care of him, of having raised him over the last 5-6 years. But he doesn't want to repay Uncle Jim by living the kind of life Uncle Jim wants for him, right? He is resentful because he's like, I owe this man, I owe him such a large debt, but I don't want to settle that debt by living the life he wants me to live. I still want to live my own life. Just because I owe this man so much doesn't give him the right to dictate what I need to be doing with my life, which I think is fair enough. Like Li Ming is totally well within his rights to be thinking that, and I don't think Jim ever thinks that Li Ming owes him in any way to live a particular life. I think Jim is always coming from a place of wanting the best for Li Ming. So there's this discord there that's I think core to both of them, where Jim is just wanting the best for Li Ming. He wants a better life for him. He wants him to live a life separate from what Jim has experienced, and everything he does is trying to get Li Ming to take steps towards that life. Whereas Li Ming is of a different opinion. He feels like Jim is pushing him towards a life he doesn't want to live. He wants to have more of a say on what he does, and he feels like, yes, I owe this man, but it's my life. I want to live it the way I do. I will repay my debt monetarily. Right? I will repay my debt by paying back with money everything I owe this man that he has spent on me. And I think that is something again that comes across multiple times in how he expresses gratitude and what he says to Uncle Jim. Like even in this scene over here, Jim says something about, you know, I pay for your tuition and I want to see you end up with a good life. And Li Ming immediately interprets that as, oh, so you think I owe you something, right? I honestly don't think that's what Jim meant, but both of them are not really listening to each other in this particular fight. What you see here is two people who have their own thought processes of what they want for each other or what the other wants for them, and they're kind of arguing in parallel tracks, right? Li Ming has built up this situation in his head where he thinks that Jim wants him to live a specific way because Jim feels like Li Ming owes him. Whereas Jim is just thinking that, hey, you know, I want you to have a better life, and this, given how my life has played out, doing something completely different is what's going to get you to a better life, right? So I think it's really interesting what this whole argument does for both of them. And talking about where it ends up, I think at the end of this whole argument, Li Ming actually ends up making Jim cry a little bit, right? He says something along the lines of, you know, is running a chicken rice diner really your dream? And it makes, he says it in a, first of all, he says it in a way which makes it sound like running a chicken rice diner is somehow beneath Jim. I don't think Li Ming meant it in that way, but it does come across a little bit like that in the way he delivers his dialogue. The other thing is, I think he's also just questioning his uncle on, you know, did you not have a dream beyond this, right? Did you not want to do more with your life? Did you not want to get out and do something? Are you living your dream right now, or are you living someone else's dream, right? And it affects Jim because he himself has probably never taken the time to take a step back and think, is this really what I want to do with my life? Given his financial commitments, given the fact that he has bills to pay, all that's probably going through Jim's head is, how do I make ends meet? And this chicken rice diner that he started is his means of survival, right? And it's not a matter of, is this what I wanted to do? It's what I have to do to keep food on the table, to keep the bills paid, to ensure that they have a roof over their heads. And so when Li Ming questions him like this, it kind of throws him off and makes him very vulnerable. You know, kudos to the acting. This is actually one of my all-time favorite scenes from the show because Earth and Fourth have acted their asses off, pardon the language, but oh my goodness, this scene is so beautifully done. There's so much emotion in both of their faces, in both of their voices. They play off each other so well. And really just a beautiful scene all around. So actually, this scene itself that we've looked at links to the next scene that I will show. This actually, let me let it play first, and then we can discuss it a little bit. So I think this scene is famously the one that caused the most controversy or backlash for Uncle Jim's character throughout the entire series. He is actually such a central figure to this whole show. A lot of the storyline revolves around him, revolves around his relationship with Li Ming, his relationship with One, his relationship with the community where Moonlight Chicken Diner is present, his relationship with Leng. And despite all of that, a lot of people disliked Uncle Jim, and a major reason for that dislike is one, I don't think a lot of people understood him or even tried to see things from his perspective. I think Li Ming is a more easy to love character, and so very early on a lot of people sided with Li Ming, which, I mean, to each their own. I think that's fair enough. Everyone has their favorites in a drama, but I think the reason this drama stands out for me so much, the reason I wanted to start this channel on this drama, is that every character has their motivations so clearly laid out, as long as you're willing to look a little deeper into it, right? And so it's not as clear cut as I like Li Ming and so I don't like Uncle Jim, or I don't like Uncle Jim because he said this particular thing in the scene where he should have been an ally and a supporter and kind of given Li Ming a safe space to talk about his sexuality. He instead kind of turned it into an argument. And to a degree, I do agree. I mean, obviously, Uncle Jim could have handled that better. But I think if you look at his character from episode 1, if you look at how it's kind of become layered and layered with each episode, what his experiences, what you learn about his past, all of those things kind of put together, if you take an aggregate of it, his reaction to Li Ming's, to discovering that Li Ming might like boys, is actually more understandable than you'd think. I said before that the only thing Uncle Jim has really wanted for Li Ming is to have a better life than he did, right? And for him, that kind of looks, what that looks like is for him to have a life that's very different from Uncle Jim's. Because Uncle Jim suffered a lot in life. He suffered probably homophobia. He suffered being, outcast from his family. He and his sister ran away, but there must have been a reason that they ran away. I do imagine at least part of that reason was his sexuality. And then there is what he says about his sister a few times, which indicates that she herself was maybe a little bit homophobic when he came out. And so there is a lot of shame and guilt and unhappiness linked with his sexuality and for his experience with being out, right? And then if you add what Beam did to him to that equation, it just takes it up 10x because yes, maybe he went through a lot on his own, but then he also experienced a long-term partner cheating on him with a woman. Even if Beam was with the woman only as to use her as a beard or for, visual sake to make his family happy, that still doesn't make it any easier for Uncle Jim to deal with it, right? He is still faced with the fact that it's because that he's a gay man, it's because that he's a man, that he is going through these things with his relationships. When he sees, the first time he sees Li Ming and Hart kiss, he actually steps away and walks away from the situation because he needs to process it, he needs to kind of understand what he's feeling about it. And so when he confronts Li Ming here in this situation, he's coming from a place of fear. He's coming from a place of also wanting to be sure that Li Ming has thought this through. Because just if you remember in the previous scene that I showed you, which was an argument that happened, I think, in episode 4, where Li Ming is so vocal about the fact that, hey, I hate the fact that I live in poverty, I hate the fact that I'm poor, and that life is so difficult because I'm poor. When Uncle Jim now says, that it's not enough that you're poor, but you're gay as well. I think he's kind of trying to tell Li Ming, or like trying to ask Li Ming that, hey, this was something you brought up not even like 2-3 months ago, saying that you hated being poor and you hated how difficult your life was because you were poor. And yet now you're okay with being not just poor, but also gay. Like, you realize your life is going to get even harder now, right? And I think that's the attitude with which he asked that question. It's not coming from a place of, oh, you're poor and gay, how dare you? Which, honestly, when I watch a lot of reactions, that's what they immediately took it as. And on behalf of Uncle Jim's character, I am low-key offended, because this character is so nuanced and so layered. I think we ought to expect more from him. I actually think Piaf did an amazing job with this scene itself, because really, if you binge watch the whole thing one after another, an episode after an episode, it all does link to each other to end up at this point, right? And I think what's most telling is this is never a point that they revisit to when they are reconciling, right? This dialogue, this argument is a non-issue for both Jim and Li Ming, because they both understand where they were coming from in that moment, right? It was everything else that needed to get talked about. It was, again, the smoking. It was the fact that Li Ming wants to work and travel, and it was the fact that he doesn't believe that he has to love someone just because they're related to him. It was all of those things that needed to get talked about. It was never this. And it was, I think, Li Ming in that way shows that he's so assured of Uncle Jim's love that it's not something he's ever really worried about. He's also never really worried about being accepted or not being accepted by Uncle Jim. He's very assured of the fact that this man's going to accept me regardless of who I love or what I do. It's just getting across, my thought process on the entire thing, or the fact that I've even thought things through, that is going to be the harder part in getting him on my side for this stuff. Now, coming to external factors kind of influencing Uncle Jim and Li Ming's relationship, I think the first one we have to talk about is One. I think One coming into their lives when he did was very critical for both Uncle Jim as well as Li Ming. One becomes this sounding board for Li Ming, someone he can go to for advice, who is willing to listen to him and really hear what he's trying to say without making quick judgments, without having all of that emotion and love as almost a barrier to being able to hear Li Ming out. And at the same time, I think One's conversations with Li Ming also help him see that he and Uncle Jim are actually very similar people, and that's why they constantly butt heads. It's because they're both stubborn, they're both kind of unbending in how they think, and they both feel like they are right. And I think One helping him realize that also helps Li Ming kind of expand his thought process to try and understand his uncle a little better. Now, One and Jim and how he helped Jim with Li Ming, I think is actually should go in much more detail in my video for Jim and One themselves. I'll just touch on it a little bit here. I think Jim really needed that external perspective of someone who was able to connect with Li Ming on a level that Jim had not achieved, who was able to give Jim a reality check in that, hey, yes, life was hard for you. Life will probably not be a walk in the park for Li Ming, but Li Ming has you, right? Li Ming has you. Li Ming could have me as well. Li Ming has people who can help him out when he runs into trouble. And so there is no way his life is going to end up the way yours did, or there's no way he is going to go through the same kind of things you did, because you're there to help make sure that that doesn't happen, right? And I think Uncle Jim really needed to hear that in order to make peace with everything, in order to be able to put forth his full support for Li Ming as well, without letting fear and worry kind of get in the way of that. The second person you have to kind of, whose relationship you need to look at when you're talking about Uncle Jim and Li Ming's relationship on the whole is Jam, right? Jam is Uncle Jim's elder sister and Li Ming's mother. She is a non-figure for most of the series. She shows up finally in episode 7. And as soon as she does, it feels almost immediately right off the bat that she's going to cause more trouble, because Uncle Jim had reached out to her to ask about a deed that he could borrow, and within seconds of her actually seemingly having a deed to give him, she tells him that, hey, you know, I want you to help convince Li Ming to move back with me, then I'll let you have my deed, right? And suddenly you're faced with this, oh no, don't do this, Uncle Jim, feeling, because you're worried that Uncle Jim is again going to disregard Li Ming's feelings on this matter. But that's where I think Uncle Jim shows real growth. It is in the fact that he doesn't really ever consider taking up Jam's offer. He's very clear from the beginning that, hey, you talk to Li Ming. He needs to have a say in this. It's between you and him. I'm kind of staying out of this. And he never really brings it up with Li Ming, except for in that scene where they're reconciling. And even then, it's not in the sense of, hey, why don't you move in with your mom? He comes at it from the point of view of, hey, why don't you want to? Right? What is your thought process on this? And I think that's very telling of like the growth he's seen through the series. The fact that he realizes that Li Ming is grown up now. Li Ming is capable of making his own decisions. He has his own view of how his life should turn out, and people around him shouldn't be making those decisions for him. Now, for Li Ming, I think his mother showing up when she did triggers a couple of different things. One, it gives him an option, right? Suddenly he's faced with this option of, I can leave this life of poverty, I can leave Moonlight Chicken Diner, I can leave Uncle Jim, who I'm fighting with all the time, in order to go live with my mother, who's promising me a better life, right? But I think what stands out very clearly when he's trying to make that decision, in that conversation he has with Leng, where he's trying to figure out, should I go live with my parents? Would you go live with your parents? I think he realizes that they are no longer the same people they were when Jam first left Li Ming with Uncle Jim. He has grown up. He has things he loves. He's become a whole person that Jam no longer knows. Case in point, her wanting him to, one of her selling points for coming to live with her being that I can get you into college really easily because of the influence that my future husband will have. Whereas Li Ming doesn't really want to go to college. And literally the entire episode, the entire series of Moonlight Chicken is him and Uncle Jim coming to an understanding on why he doesn't want to go to college and what he wants from his life. And suddenly he realizes that he might need to, if he does move in with his mother, this is an argument he's going to have again with her, but he's less assured of his success in maybe convincing her of what he wants. Because I think at the end of the day, Li Ming, for all of his anger and his argumentativeness with Uncle Jim. He's very well aware of the fact that at the end of the day, Uncle Jim will let him do what he wants, will let him live life on his own terms. Even if he's upset about it, Uncle Jim will let that happen. But will his mother do the same? He's not so sure. So I think that introduction of Jam towards the very end of the show actually served as a catalyst to bring Li Ming and Jim closer together, because Li Ming comes to this understanding of, this is the life that I choose, right? This is the life that I would have chosen even if I had a choice. Even if I had a choice to go back and do things differently, I would want to grow up with Uncle Jim. I would want to live with him and be raised by him. I wouldn't want it to happen differently. And I think that's a turning point for Li Ming in how he views his life, in how he appreciates it as well, and in how he appreciates Jim as well. And for Jim, it's hearing Li Ming say, I think when they're in their reconciliation conversation, when Li Ming says, I don't know whether I love her or not. It would be easier for me to say if I loved you or not. And Uncle Jim says, okay. Doesn't say anything, but he kind of raises an eyebrow and he's like, all right, like, go on. And Li Ming says, I love you, right? And I think that just is that last thing that Jim needed to just be at peace with everything Li Ming does, and also come to the realization that, okay, I think I raised this kid well. I think he's well on his way to being a successful adult, whatever he chooses to do. I think I can worry a little less about him, and even if he makes wrong choices, even if he ends up in a bad situation, he's not alone, because I'm always going to be there to have his back. I'm always going to be there to support him. And I think this was the last thing Jim kind of needed to be at peace with everything and really just embrace his relationship with Li Ming in its evolving form, right? I think that brings me to an end of this video on Uncle Jim and Li Ming and their special relationship. I hope you guys enjoyed going through this journey of really analyzing the characters with me. My next video will be on Alan and One. Just there is so much I want to discuss. So I'm looking forward to putting that video together. In the meantime, I hope you all enjoyed this one. I would love to hear your thoughts on all of the theories that I shared in the comment section. Please do, if you enjoyed this video and you haven't done it yet, please do subscribe. I will be posting more content on Moonlight Chicken, and then I will also start moving into other animes or dramas based on what I choose to pick up. I'm also open to suggestions, so if there's any particular show you want me to cover on this channel, please do let me know. If I haven't watched it yet, I will give it a watch and see what I can do. That brings me to the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed. Please do leave a like, subscribe, and leave a comment with your thoughts. It was nice speaking to all of you. This is Sun signing off.